Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's distribution demo. In this week's demo, we are going to focus on one of the issues that the Geo team is trying to resolve for installing a Geo installation with Patroni replication. So in this issue, the primary cluster has 3-node database, and the secondary has a single node database. And the idea is the objective is to replicate database from the secondary, from the primary Patroni cluster to the secondary. The way that the Geo team has verified this is to use Orchestrator to set up a rep manager cluster, and then switch from rep manager to Patroni, and then try to use the secondary to connect the secondary to the Patroni cluster and replicate. So they run into a series of issues. One particular issue is permanent slots that cause some trouble, and there are some follow-up issues to work on that. But in this demo in particular, we are going to focus on to follow their footsteps and see what they are dealing with and how we can find another solution. So I used Orchestrator, and it's following the same instruction as the README, the quick start guide for Orchestrator, and nothing particular to report there. I just left some notes. One particular issue that I found a bit annoying was I used the dev container, and the generated SSH key was gone after I exited the container. So I couldn't connect to the VMs after I left the container. So I had to rebuild the cluster and get that key from the container into my host machine and work. So just let me show you the couple of important files that I used. One particular file that we want to see is, the GitLab cluster definition. So we are deploying a main cluster with 3 database nodes, 3 console nodes, 1 application node, and the secondary, which is called Geo1, has 1 database and 1 application. So I also noticed that as we need to have console nodes, separate console nodes, otherwise the orchestrator does not deploy rep manager, does not configure the rep manager. Correct me if I'm wrong, Robert, if I'm wrong. Do I need to set the console to get the rep manager configured?
So it needs console to believe that it's high availability, which is what rep manager would be. So that's a business logic that probably you and I should have an async issue and like hash that out, make sure we understand what determines what, when, and how, and make the business logic match what we expect. So that's a pain point that I know is there and you've stumbled over. So, so yeah, we need to just determine what our business rules are. It's very naive. It's if you have console, you're high availability. If you don't, you're not.
Okay. So yeah, because generally when we deploy, the console node is also run on the same database. So my initial thought was, if I have more than 1 database, I am running into HA mode. But that's okay. I set up this cluster pretty smoothly, following exactly these 5 steps here, and it went ahead without any trouble. I have my cluster deployed. Let me show you. This is the cluster that I deployed. It's all there. Now we are going to start working on the connect to the database nodes and see what will happen there, how they are configured, and what we are going to do with it. So let me just try to see if I can connect to all of them all at once. So database external addresses. Okay, this is the key that we want. And just bear with me until I connect to these. Okay.
Oh, Stan, may I ask you one question while you're working through that?
I want to connect to the databases and see how they are configured and do the next step of the demo, because supposedly it should be configured with Rep Manager. Now I want to switch from Rep Manager to Patroni. And
Gotcha.
then what will
Robert,
happen next?
do you have a question though ahead of that? Is that?
It's not vital to the first step we're at. I just want to make sure, when you said you struggle with the SSH key pair and the persistence, we updated the quick start. Was the quick start, was it apparent to you that the auto-generated key wouldn't persist after your run? Because if it wasn't, then we need to make another adjustment to that documentation. Because that's a pain point that you, Nelia, basically everybody hit that and went, what? And so that's why we updated the docs. And if you hit it again after the update, then I want to make sure we clarify that, because that's a really important thing to not stumble over. So that's what I was.
Yeah, I should have. I should have known that the SSH key is in the container, but since I was running it and I just closed the container, I didn't expect everything to go away. So it caught me by surprise, and I really didn't take a look into the documentation to see what would happen next. It wasn't like a bold notification that this will happen if you do that. That was the only issue that I ran into. That's the only one. Otherwise, the whole other experience was completely smooth. So let me just connect. Okay. So this is the first database on the main. Let me just put this aside. So we have all this screen to ourselves. This is the main database. Main database 2, let's move it here. And there must be another one. Yeah, right here. This is the geo database. Okay, let me just increase the size. Is it visible enough for you? The fonts are big enough? Can you see?
I can see it.
That I type here? Okay, good. Okay, so this is the main database. So let's try to see, first of all, where we are, because I just ran this cluster, built the cluster, and I want to see. Okay, we have a rep manager D running. Let's see how the rep manager is doing. So we certainly have a working cluster here, which is good. Let's switch to geodatabase and let's take a look at here. Okay, we have a PostgreSQL and a GeoPostgreSQL. So let's take a look at the database configuration, because we expect that the configuration contains the recovery conf. I'm going to take a look at recovery conf to see what information is in there. Okay, So this particular line, primary slot name and primary connection info, seems to be the source of the problem with Patroni, according to the issue that we are trying to replicate. So especially this primary slot name here. So let's take a look at PostgreSQL logs. Okay, now I am going to, following the documentation, again, let me show you the documentation. Where is it? Right here. Okay, following this documentation, I am going to switch every rep manager node to rep manager cluster to Patroni. And during this, the geo replication should fail. So we're going to start from standbys, stop rep manager D on all nodes, and then 12 on replicas. Let's make sure that we don't have any wall sender. Actually, we only have one wall sender in here, which I think this must be yeah, this is the wall sender for the geo node, geo database. So let's go ahead and supposedly we only need to add Patroni enable here, and everything else should. Actually, we must remove this one. Sorry, less aggressively. And the rep manager configuration will be ignored anyway. Okay. Before doing it, let's take a look at the replication slots. Actually, I should have done the same thing on replica nodes as well. I'm just going to check if the replication slot is available on replica nodes as well or not. So we have one Geo1 replication slot physical on primary. I just want to make sure that if it has been replicated, or is there any trace of this? I don't think there should be. No, okay. That makes total sense because that replication slot is created per node. It is not something that should be replicated, but it will cause a problem later that we will see. Okay. So let's go ahead and do the reconfigure here. Let's do the same on the replica nodes. Let's make Patroni enable. Okay, something happened. The database is down. Okay. Hmm. Seems that Patroni is up. Okay, this time is actually I ran into a very interesting issue. Now the replication is Patroni complained that it cannot drop the Geo1 replication slot, and now the primary is not failing. Because the way that it should have happened is that Patroni starts and it tries to delete every replication slot that is there, and it doesn't manage by itself, and it doesn't manage it. And we will see that we should be able to see that the replication on the primary, on the secondary node fails because the persistent slot is not there. I don't know why it is complaining to drop the replication slot. I'm gonna help Patroni to drop that. There is a function to drop this replication slot. Let me Google it. Okay. Let's see if the function exists. Yeah, the function is certainly there. So I think for the purpose of this demo, I should have, for the replication, for this particular replication, I should have done the following. I should have stopped Postgresql on the secondary as well. Yeah, now it is gone. Okay, now it is complaining about the Geo1. But our Patroni startup is okay. This is actually PostgreSQL log. This is not Patroni log. So let me go ahead and just finish the cluster first. Okay. So this one is based on 13.1 deployment, so I don't have the Patroni subcommands to see. So I need to see the status of the cluster. So I need to directly tap into Patroni ETL, which is going to be a bit longer to write. -c. We have a Patroni cluster, but we still have a problem on the geo secondary. And I think I know why it is happening, because we should have called a geo replication database. There is a geo command that, let me bring up the documentation. I am going to follow the documentation. Sorry, just bear with me. I'm going to bring back my browser. Okay, so let me go to docs. Geo database replication. So at some point we need to, there is a command that I think it is replicate geodatabase. We should call this command after we switch to Patroni. So we need to stop, I think we need to stop secondary as well, because it still has an active vault sender, and switch from Patroni, switch from rep manager to Patroni will not, it happens, but it is not, it may end up with an unintended, in an unintended state, which it did. So the geo team reported that they experienced problem with replication on the secondary. We saw that Patroni startup was trying to delete the slot, and it couldn't. So this is something that should be avoided. It should be avoided. So, and the reason was that there was an active vault sender. So the replication from the secondary should have been stopped in this particular setup, because we have used orchestrator to set up this cluster, and we wanted to switch from rep manager to Patroni. So I assume that if we fork from, if we start supporting Patroni from with rep manager, with support Patroni in orchestrator, we will not run into this issue. I'm going to just do this. Let me grab the host name of the master. Okay. So we have a Patroni cluster, and we have a PostgreSQL that is so let's take a look. We have 3 replication slots. These are replication slots for Patroni members, and this one is actually the one that we created for the node. Okay, now on secondary, we have another problem.
I think you just have to run reconfigure again. The active replicating copies over the primary's HBA conf.
Yeah, it looks like that it replicated the copied HBA conf. Let me see. Isn't it a documentation that we need to run configure after this? Okay. Doesn't seem that the database crashed and burned. So I want to do something now, and this is the problem that it's not limited to Rep Manager. It is not limited to Patroni. This is something that will happen when the secondary node is replicating from a cluster. The problem is that if I do the failover, I do not expect that the secondary can follow the leader. So let's take a look at one of the replicas as I shut down the current master.
And Hossein, when you say the secondary won't follow the leader, is that the behavior we talked about in the geo issue with failover with the orchestrator, where the replica slot won't exist to catch over? Is it that same behavior, or is it different?
No, I think it is different, because if the slot is there, but the thing is, if I shut it down, because it uses recovery conf to follow that, to follow the leader, I think that the configuration is static.
Okay, there's another one in there that where the primary database cluster doesn't replicate the slots. So if the primary leader goes down on the primary site, the secondary that assumes leadership won't have the slot.
I think that's a problem after this one, because right now the replication is broken. As you can see, there is a new leader. Let me see if I still have. Okay. Yeah, there is a new leader, and that leader is database 3, this one. And the secondary cannot replicate because the master is gone. So this is a problem. I don't know how to fix this. I would have expected at least we have one console agent on secondary side, which watches for PostgreSQL service and sees if it goes down and if there is a new leader, and goes and reconfigures the database, or at least changes the recovery conf to point it to a new one. What that point? But we also needed, we also needed the primary slot.
Yeah, so there's a double thing here, right? Because we had talked through this as part of the orchestrator piece, that even if console exists, if you talk about, well, can we just put console in there and make that work and connect to, even if it exists to connect it over the mesh, the slot isn't there to reconnect, so you still have to remake the slot and replicate, and there's a whole other, there's more than just adding the console mesh, because it'll go to the new leader, with the new leader, that slot doesn't get replicated from the previous leader. And so the slot, so even if it knows where to go.
It shouldn't. The slot is, if I understand it correctly, the slot is specific to one particular node. So replicating the slot from master to the follower to a replica is not necessarily the right thing to do, because that depends on the cursor position. Because now the source of the vol streaming is a different node, which might be in another point of recovery.
Yep,
so the lag would be different.
Yep, that's correct. And that said, this is one of the thorny issues. I'm just calling this out because Stephen, what Hossein is running into here and what I have in Orchestrator, this is a super thorny issue that's going to be a lot of how do we want to handle it. This is part of database hardening, what do we do discussion from Orchestrator as well. So just calling it out. This is a huge problem in terms of uptime. All right, Hossein, back to you. Sorry.
Gotcha.
No worries. Actually, yeah, I just wanted to show that, first of all, the issue that we had on the problem that we had in the issue that was subject of this demo, verifying Patroni in a simple geo installation, is actually, I believe, occurs because of the way that we configure the cluster and switching from rep manager to Patroni and not killing the wall sender and not calling the, so if we do this thing and call the wall sender on the secondary and call the GeoPG replicate command again and reconfigure again, we shouldn't run into the same problem that the geo team reported. And if we support Patroni in Orchestrator, this should be fine because the cluster will be set up from the beginning like this. But I think that we will run into another issue if the master fails on the primary site, the secondary site cannot simply follow it, and that's a real issue here, which I think we need to focus on.
Yep, that's exactly right. That's where I kind of see a major pain point. So.
And I'm thinking
bad
about
that it's a problem,
console.
but yeah.
Again, I tried to look into, because we added in 13.2 we added something to. So basically, Patroni registers an SRV record for PostgreSQL HA. So we can look up via DNS we can look up the primary via DNS, and we can use DNS record. But then there will be two problems. First, I haven't seen any specific DNS configuration for PostgreSQL that we can point it to a specific DNS endpoint. Two, even if we could do that, or even find a way around it, the problem would be the replication slot. It should be created anyway. It should be created manually. So I think this is one of the limitations.
Yeah, so we can recreate this problem every time, right?
Yes.
The same behavior every time, right?
Every time.
Every time,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so bad that we have a problem, good that it's reproducible, right? I think we'll get enough eyes on it.
And Hossein, I'm going to check and make sure. If not, I'm going to tag you on the thread where I went into all this so that you can add the details from what you found, so we can focus in and like make sure we're describing the exact same. Because I think you got like an extra bit before where I discovered the problem. So let's make sure we focus that in so that we can describe the problem well, the product, and then schedule whatever we want to figure out to do.
Definitely we should follow this up. This is going to be a problem for everybody. And I think as long as we deploy the secondary like this and we don't use the secondary cluster, the secondary cluster feature of a standby cluster feature of Patroni, we will still have experienced this issue. Okay. So any questions, any like pointers for the future action from here? So we are almost done, and we are 5 minutes past our set time. So thank you everyone for joining and participating in this week's meeting, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hussein.